Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. We had the start of the Formula 1 2025 season with the Australian Grand Prix this past weekend, but we have already talked about that race in this video, so watch that if you haven't already. There was also a lot of other racing from Melbourne and other places, and that is what we are catching up with in today's offering, including a look at the start of Formula 2 and Formula 3 and round 2 of Supercars, all from Melbourne, the IMSA with the 12 Hours of Sebring, and NASCAR with the Pennzoil 400 presented by Jiffy Lube from the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Some great action to go back through as always, so make sure you subscribe and let's jump into this look at all of last weekend's motorsport. We start off with the Formula 2 after the disaster that was 2024 for Victor Martins, starting 2025 with pole in the feature race. Maybe his luck had turned around. Well, he lost the car and was the first Formula 2 retirement of the year, so maybe not. Max Esterson did exactly what I thought he would, crash whilst running last and bring out the safety car. His teammate Sami Megatunov was off next, not a happy start to the year for Trident. Joshua Dirksen won the race, denying Leonardo Fornaroli again. Dirksen has won the last two Formula 2 races and starts his 2025 off in style. Victor Martins was on pole for the feature and looking to undo the bad luck that has blighted him for the last year and a race. Well, he'd have to overcome the wet conditions and a safety car start, and then a red flag, and eventually the race's cancellation. Another blow for Victor Martins. The Frenchman is good, but his luck is tremendously awful. Hopefully his luck turns at Bahrain in just under a month's time. On to Formula 3, and the sprint race started with a few early casualties. Charlie Wirtz received damage and Joshua Defek turned round Lewis Sharp. That brought out an early virtual safety car, but soon after we resumed, we soon had a full safety car for Lawrence Van Hopen, James Wharton and pole sitter for the feature race, Rafael Camara, all getting tangled up, and a couple of cars were left on track. Once it resumed, minus several cars, we got back to business and there was some great action here. DRS in Formula 3 is completely pointless, they don't need it. Santiago Ramos led and was sliding around, but Martínez Stenson could not get past. All racing was halted by Bruno Del Pino and Javier Segura colliding, bringing out the safety car again. The race ended behind the safety car. Santiago Ramos took the first win of the year for Van Amersfoort, something he didn't do with Trident in 2024. Speaking of Trident, no drivers in the top 10, all hit trouble, and Prema only had one, Noel Leon in 10th. Not a good start to the year for the normal front runners in F3. Of course, we still have a feature race and it was wet, and not long before we had our first safety car with Nicholas Solov and Callum Voisin colliding. After that, everyone was sensible. There was the odd spinner, but overall everyone did a very good job in very difficult conditions. That was until Christian Ho had a big off and smashed his dams to pieces. Sadly, that meant a red flag and a win for Rafael Camara from teammate Noah Stromstead. Good racing in Formula 3, but there were a lot of interruptions, and the weather played its part in the feature. Still very hard to pick a champion, but Prema having a dreadful weekend may make me lean towards Trident. Our final bit of racing from Melbourne was the 4 races that were part of the second round of the Repco Supercars Championship. Some pretty crazy stuff going on whilst Brock Feeney led the race from teammate Will Brown. Cam Waters and Thomas Randall were at the back and working their way forward. They got into some interesting scrapes and we even had around 5 cars plus heading into corners together. But through it all, Waters and Randall did make progress. The craziness continued after a safety car with both Premier racing cars getting taken out in separate incidents. In the end, Waters and Randall climbed to 7th and 8th, whilst Brock Feeney took his first win of 2025. Race 2 started with a big crash with Jack LeBrock. Pretty much the entire front of the Erebus Chevrolet was lost. After a long safety car, David Reynolds got turned around and stuck in the gravel, so the safety car came back out. A lot of this race was interrupted, but we did get to see a first ever win for Cameron Hill in the Matt Stone Chevrolet. The first lap of race 3 was carnage, at least 4 different spinners, including James Golding again. Later on, Cooper Murray would have an off, another driver having an interesting weekend. After 2 long stoppages, there wasn't a lot of racing going on. Will Brown won from Brock Feeney with a feisty Nick Percat holding on to 3rd despite issues. The final race of this Melbourne V8 barrage was the only wet one and it never started. Just like the Formula 2 feature race, it was abandoned. Will Brown leads the championship from Cam Waters and Brock Feeney. A lot of safety cars meant the racing was very stop-start, but I did enjoy the shorter races. Some Repco supercar races can drag, especially when you have 3 long races in a weekend, and mixing in some shorter races through the season might be beneficial. Enjoyable enough, but Melbourne overall was a bit of a mess. Outside of Australia, we had the second round of the IMSA for 2025, the 12 hours of Sebring. We had some drama at the start. There were a couple of incidents, and pole sitter and leader Dries Van Tor got a drive-through for switching lanes at the start. A silly mistake for such an experienced driver. Our first big crash was Charlie Scardina in the Triazzi Ferrari, getting nudged off by a Cadillac and hitting the concrete blocks. That brought out the second safety car, and we were only an hour in. The Aero Motorsport LMP2 car had a couple of incidents early on and hit the tyres hard with 10.5 hours left. Porsche were back in the lead of the hypercars by the halfway point after falling behind the Cadillacs for some time. In the GTD class, the Korthoff Mercedes was dominating until it ground to a stop. They weren't the only GT in trouble. The AF Corse Ferrari went for a wild ride whilst leading and eventually retired, and Casper Stevenson in the Aston had a spin with 3 hours to go. That could have been a much larger accident. The AF Corse LMP2 car had a crash just as the sun started to set. The best of the racing was in the GT class, with the Vassar Sullivan Lexus and Winwood Mercedes having a great fight over the last hour. Out in front though, it was another Porsche Penske win, and they are now first and second in the championship. Into Europol 1 in LMP2, AO Racing Porsche in GTD Pro, and Winwood Mercedes in GTD. Porsche Penske looked to have a tight hold over the IMSA, something that seems to have slipped from the WEC. We'll see if they can carry it on with the next round at Long Beach in April. Finally, we have NASCAR from Las Vegas. Absolutely nothing interesting to say about this race. Some wheels fell off. A few very typical NASCAR crashes. We did get a first win for Josh Berry ahead of Daniel Suarez. Maybe I just wasn't in the mood, but this was a tedious affair from the City of Sin. So that was all the racing from the past weekend. My race of the weekend would have to be the Formula 3 sprint race, which was a lot of fun. Supercars Race 1 was also a highlight of the week, and I did enjoy the 12 hours of Sebring. Next weekend we have more Formula 1 with the Chinese Grand Prix, but joining them in a supporting role is the F1 Academy, kicking off their 2025 season at Shanghai. We also have IndyCar from the Thermal Club, an actual championship round in 2025, NASCAR from Miami, and World Rally Championship with the Safari Rally, one of the toughest on the calendar. So it's another busy weekend. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any Frontrunner content incoming. Let me know your thoughts and race of the weekend in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.